りおしまい。
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Get the Mic, the only show where your host on the left, Owl,
And your host on the right, Brock.
dissect fiction for its mythological significance. On this episode, we're talking about Dragon Ball as usual, and in particular, episode 100, The Spirit Canon. But before we get started, if you like what you hear, give us a like, subscribe. We upload. We upload new episodes Monday and Thursday on YouTube, on Rumble Tuesdays and Fridays, so give us a watch on either of those platforms. I think we don't have any housekeeping stuff to get through, so I think we'll go ahead and get into the episode.
Yeah, sounds good.
So without further ado, this is episode 100, The Spirit Canon. The first thing we see is that Tien assaults Goku with his four-armed technique, driving him to the edge of the arena before catching him by all four limbs in midair. Tien begins to repeatedly drive Goku's body down onto his head, but Goku responds by smacking Tien's head around with his tail, causing him to let go. So we see this first exchange with the four-armed, or what do they call it in the English dub? The four witches technique, something like that.
I don't know. I didn't even listen to the English of this section of the story because I felt like it was getting too far off of
It gets a little far off.
what the spirit of it is.
But at any rate, that this is the first little exchange we see of that. And I think in the last episode we talked a bit about the four-armed technique, right?
Mm-hmm.
We talked about its manifestation as a overpowering force, being as an enlightened spirit can represent the strength of two people. And what you were saying, I think I'll let you say.
Right, with it being a set of four, it sort of creates a cross for him. And since Tien is now having to sort of recenter himself as to what his authority is, what he's going to be oriented toward,
With Shengon,
he has to put himself in the middle of that, right? So now he's not really acting on Shin's orders. Shin's not protecting him in this fight. He's doing it for his own reason, and so he has to establish what that center of his motivation is, right?
And what is it to bear the burden on his shoulders, let's say, the burden, responsibility, and authority of his own school, which is kind of represented by this extra set of appendages, right? That Tien's reach exceeds himself. And so his responsibility is to more than just himself.
Right. there is also this aspect of it where so he catches Goku, his arms and his legs, and he holds him up above him, and then he drives him down against him, right? And it's almost like he's beating Goku up against the idea that's like, I'm my own man. Like I've now superseded my master in what I'm doing, but you still have Roshi as your master, for instance, right?
I don't. Ooh, okay.
Because he is placing himself at that center, like he's gonna
See,
be the
I agree with that. Like I have lifted the suffering, or let's say I've bared my cross, right? And I've become the Axis Mundi, where I'm the master of my own destiny. I've become a
right,
fully realized individual. Where you still rely on Roshi. I don't know if it's as much that. It may be Tien saying that, but I
right.
don't think that's where
Well, it doesn't
Goku
work.
actually is.
Well, it doesn't
Right.
work
And
specifically because Goku goes beyond that, right? Goku can say, I
mhm.
can be subordinated to a master and also sort of be my own man." Because Goku has a tail that reaches back into all of his ancestry,
Rather to
right?
say, well, it's a specific reason why you use the tail, right? Because it's to say that the adoration for the ancestral spirit that is inhabited by Roshi is one that if holy doesn't need to be rejected. Basically, it's saying to Tien, like, the only reason why now you're a fully realized individual and you're the master of your school is because your master was corrupt. Shen is corrupt, is a corrupt spirit.
Right. That
And to say that if oriented properly, with um, the proper respect and adoration for the ancestral and spiritual father, then that doesn't necessarily need to be an appendage that is, uh, let's say, amputated. Because at this point we have four appendages, and that's a lot of the theming of it, right? And so Shen being an appendage there of and a facet of Tien's personage being extracted is because he's corrupt. Roshi doesn't have to be extracted because he's not corrupt. And basically what Goku tells him by both enduring the suffering on the Axis Mundi and slapping him around with the tail is to say that if one pays proper adoration for the spirit of the Father and serves the spirit of the Father that receives that in a holy manner, it doesn't have to be separated that way.
not only that, but it's appealing to the universal truth that everyone comes from a father, right? So even if Tien has superseded his spiritual father, he is like Goku, someone who's on the other end of this bestial
Right,
trail,
to
right?
say that there's nothing more to learn from the spirit of the Father, that Tien is now his own person beyond Shen,
But
is true.
even
But
though
to say that about Goku is to say that even though the spiritual father, or maybe not even though, but the spiritual father himself has wisdom that has not yet been unlocked by his students, though they've surpassed his basic teachings.
there's that facet of it, and then also sort of what Goku's tail is.
Yep, just
Oh,
like
I've
I
just
thought.
never seen it turn the light off on the
It
mics
was just
before.
lagging. So, anyways, really, it turned off your mic?
That's what I was saying.
Wow. What do you know? Well, mine also froze there, so I think it was just it freezing. Anyways, we'll edit this part out if I remember. If not, enjoy this nothing. So, back to what I was saying. um,
Right. What I
I agree
so
that
yeah, I was
acknowledging that is saying that there is more to learn from the spirit of the Father than only foisting oneself into the responsibility of such. But go ahead. What?
right, and specifically, Goku's tail is now functioning as something that he's strengthened. That's not a weakness for him, right?
And where did that strength come from? But the spirit of the Father.
Not just that, but from his experience out in the world, right? Like Goku has also taken on the hypothetical responsibility of being his own man because he's been walking the world for the past three
Right,
years,
but I
right?
what I was wanting to bring up was the impetus of that of Grandpa Gohan. But yeah,
Right. But to say that Goku, having done that for the last 3 years, can he can point to the strength in that universal. How would you say it? It's the what can be learned from the spirit of the father is a universal thing rather than it just being something that you would learn specifically from one chosen master, right? So the strength of Goku's tail is like to part of it is that he's been living out there and experiencing fathers across the world, like like a more worldly father. Like the the chaotic world out there has been what he's been learning from
Well, the
rather than Roshi,
strengthening of his
right?
tail, right, is the whole concept of that pointed out by Grandpa Gohan is Goku's weakness, right? And by pointing out his weakness, it illustrates to Goku that the way to overcome that weakness is by exposing oneself to the world, doing the quest that we were just talking
Mhm.
about, right?
So anyway, all of that comes back to say that that's why Goku is beating Tien over the head with his tail here,
And when
is
we
to
get to
say
Z,
that
we can talk
like,
about that.
yeah, you may have technically gone beyond your master. You may be at the center of your experience now, and it's all about standing up and trying to be the example rather than follow an example. I already know that, and I've integrated that into my strength.
Right, and but it's a more holy integration than what we've seen from Tien.
Right.
Well, maybe not more holy. I don't know if I want to say that. But it is an integration a step above what Tien has been able to achieve because he's integrated the idea of keeping the spirit of the father around to bask in that wisdom while simultaneously adopting a responsibility for his own individuality, unlike Krillin, let's say. And so he is able to free himself from Tien's grappling attack.
Right, with which that grappling attack is sort of like I've pinned down what it means to be, right? Like he's
Hmm.
fully grasped Goku. Just want to say that like the
Well, he
the
hasn't
physical
though.
act of what he's done is
He's
he's saying that he has. That's what
he
he's
he's fully grasped the he's fully grasped the mode of being that consciously drives Goku. It's the subconscious that he's unable to grapple with, and that whole
right. The animating deeper element to it is what he
right,
hasn't grasped, which
right,
he
right,
doesn't physically grasp. I just want to
which
kind
he
of
can't.
point out
Yeah,
that he's grasping specifically in
yeah,
that
he
sense,
is that's
and he's
and that's what it is.
understanding him. He's
And we're gonna
standing
see
under him, and
some
he's
more
grasping.
grasping in
Yeah.
a minute, right? And so then we see Goku proclaims that if Tien can have 4 arms, then he can attack with 8. After a moment of focus, Goku seems to have split his arms into 8 and launches into a barrage of attacks toward Tien. The two square off before flying into each other, seeming to knock each other out. The two manage to get back up at the count of 9, though they've both been winded by the exchange. And so here we see Goku taking it one step further, but it's almost in a mocking way because the way that Goku does it is false. It's an illusion. Like he's moving his arms so fast that it looks like he has 4 arms on each side,
Right.
whereas Tien actually has an instantiation of 4 arms, right?
Right. It's also Goku using that eight-handed punch that he had learned whenever he was out on the filler, quote unquote filler
With
episodes, right?
Tenlong.
Yeah.
Yeah, our
It's
best
that,
episode ever.
and there's the eight-handed technique whenever he fights against or maybe it was the hundred-handed technique or whatever he called it
Choppa.
against Choppa, right? And so we have the handed techniques that come out. And so Goku's like, "Oh, well, how do I say? Even though I can't physically be an instantiation that you are, I can show that what you're acting out, I can imitate and build upon, right? And I already have in essence, right? Because I've used it in fights. Maybe not out in the real world in the same sense that like Tien is instantiated, but he does understand what it means. And so he's showing that he not only has a full understanding of what it means, but he can build upon the idea of what Tien is doing there, right?
Right, and by doing so, he almost shows the futility of Tien's technique, right? One of his ultimate techniques. And so they fly into each other after Goku does this, and they seem to knock each other out. After both getting up at the count of 9, it's revealed that they're pretty tired. They've expended a lot of their energy.
Now, Roshi
Energy.
in this sequence calls out is that it's the same thing that happened whenever he squared off against Goku, which was when they were really tired and beaten and bruised, they exchanged the kicks in midair and then both fell down. And that's what defeated Goku before was that he wasn't physically instantiated in the world in the same way that Roshi was, right? So Roshi essentially leveraged the fact that he was the Roshi
Well, let's even
to
say
beat the tie,
the
right?
maturity of each of them incorporated into the integration they have was lacking on Goku's part simply from lack of experience, not necessarily. And it's the experience, or let's say there's a quote from Lord of the Rings where Aomir is talking about Mary, and he says, "I don't doubt his heart, just the reach of his arm." Right,
Right.
and that's to say what you're saying about his physical instantiation, how he hasn't reached that physical maturity, nor, and that's also represented by the lack of experience. It's both physical maturity and, um, what do I want to say? Life experiences.
Right. And I think that's why Roshi specifically calls it out here that it's the same as before. Because Goku now does have quite a bit of life experience and it doesn't defeat him like last time.
Right. That's what I was going to say too. Yeah.
And that it also signals that there's a step now where we're going to go in a different direction in this fight, where we've seen them physically come up against each other to a certain limit, right? And we've seen that as far as they've been able to instantiate themselves in the world, they both have done it to the best of their abilities, and it also
Yeah, this is where
is
they move past Roshi, really.
yeah, and we see that this has worn out their spirit. Even they're both out of breath, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so now we're going to start stepping into the end game of this fight and seeing what the new limit is.
Right. And so Tien lunges forward to attack, and Goku dodges behind him, kicking his knee and driving him into the ground. He then pulls Tien's legs up in a classic Walls of Jericho, pulling back his torso and stretching out his midsection, and begins to bend his back, pinning him to the ground. Tien tries to choke Goku with his additional arms, but they quickly fail, retreating into his back. Chaozu offers to help him, but Tien declines, forcing himself upright with his arms and flinging Goku into the wall of the arena. Goku quickly pulls himself out of the rubble and squares off against Tien once again. And so here, we just saw Tien grasp all of Goku. So Goku in turn says, "Okay, I'll grasp all of you."
Right. And so he pins him down.
Yes. And as Tien tries to choke him with those extra arms, which we were talking about, the incorporation of um, outside of the self into that suffering, which is encapsulated by the cross, or the X marks the spot. Um, Here, it's different because Goku just has his legs, but he uses that ability to try and choke Goku out. Goku, having already kind of incorporated this and integrated this into his being, what Tien is doing, that uh, is able to resist it, even though he's losing breath. Right, the force he's able to exert by grasping Tien is enough to break his concentration and make the arms withdraw into his back.
Right. It's sort of a parallel in a sense to what Goku did with his tail to be his sort of trump card when he's pinned down, right? So Tien's trump card here is that status as, like I was saying, as an Axis Mundi. And he's like, would bearing the cross that I bear now break your spirit? Right. So he tries to cut off his breath with those additional arms. And we see that Goku is not defeated by that. And he's not going to give up this fight, no matter what. Then we see the same thing happen here with Tien whenever Chaozu responds by holding his finger up, and then Tien says, "No, I won't give up." And the announcer comes in and he says, "You can give up," and he says, "I wouldn't give up even if I died," or something along those
Yeah,
lines,
something
right?
like that. Yeah.
I'd rather die than give up. So we both see that they both have the same level of resolve. And what ultimately allows Tien to break free of this is the strength of his arms and his ability to
Well, his
leverage
legs
his
too, right?
size
Yeah,
against
yeah.
Goku. Ultimately, his physical strength and his size does stop Goku from being able to pin him
Well,
down,
I would say
which is
it's
his bigness. You could say, right?
I would say it's not his weakness. I would say that it is the integration that he's just achieved that allows him to do this. I don't think that Tien, pre Shen being expelled, would have been able to break out of the walls of Jericho here.
No, I don't think so. I think that it is.
And it's specifically because Chaozu's the thing that makes him able to do is like Chaozu's like, I can help, and he's like, no, remember that it's me bearing the cross, right? And so I'll push myself up and fling him out of here. And it's
Right.
that goodness that he's incorporated into himself that allows him to even stand a chance against Goku in this end.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's ultimately, even though
And it's why too that his arms retract, because the whole using the Axis Mundi as an attack is not something that is on the proper path, and so he realizes that as well because it's ineffective in his attempt to prevent Goku from submitting him.
I think it ultimately is the same as how it is with Goku trying to use the Kamehameha against him, where he realizes this isn't something that's going to defeat Goku also. And they say in the episode, oh, the force of Goku caused him to lose his focus. But I think that he really what happened was he was having to orient himself in a very true direction to use his energy the most efficiently that he could against Goku, and that was
And the
not going
wet
to be an efficient
and the
thing for him to continue.
weaponization of the forearm technique, which Shen taught Tien, is in and of itself is unholy because the weaponization of the Axis Mundi is unholy.
You see, I don't know if I 100% agree with that just because of what we know
Let's say
about
against
the power
Goku.
pole.
Let's say against Goku.
Because there is a weaponization of the use of the Axis Mundi, but only whenever it's paid to a reverence outside of oneself. And I think what's unholy about it here is that taking it on as an
Right,
aspect of yourself
it's
and when
what the
wielding it,
Crane School can
yeah,
do, right? Which is taking those holy attributes, using the Axis Mundi as a weapon in a holy manner, and turning it unholy by turning it into the self.
exactly, turning it into an aspect of the self and not as something outside of the self.
So right,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
I think the identification with the Axis Mundi and the way that he has um, is fundamentally what is wrong, right? And so he
right, and so his arms go back because he's realized that's not something like you said that he is going to be able to defeat Goku.
and then it his attack that defeats Goku, right? Trying to push himself back up, right? It's like the literally elevating himself gives him the opportunity.
To square off against Goku once again.
Well, it's a pivot, right? Because Goku has established himself like an anchor, right? And so Tien has to counterbalance against it, and it's his strength, his ability to get up or to elevate himself that stops Goku from having the upper hand on him here. Because that's what Goku knows is the self elevation, right? Like the fundamental driving force that's behind Goku, which is still not necessarily what's behind Tien, right? It's a part of it, but he's guided by
He's coming around, but
so
yeah,
many
yeah,
other
yeah, yeah.
things over and over. So I think that this is part of that. Goku doesn't beat him inherently here by pinning him down because he's like, no, I am getting better. I need to think better, right?
Yeah, that's exactly it. Because that grasping, right? Tien tries to grasp all of Goku. He's unable to, because by the nature of the attack that he's using, Goku grasping Tien, he's unable to succeed because Tien adopts a form which Goku can't disagree with. Let's say, and so that elevation launches him into the wall, and then they square off once again. And so the last thing that we see is that Tien compliments Goku's strength, but then warns him that his next attack will surely kill him, advising him to dodge. Chiaotzu recognizes that the Kikoho, the energy cannon, and Roshi tells Krillin that this attack is tremendously destructive, many more times so than the Kamehameha wave, at the cost of the lifespan of its wielder, though. Tien then levitates above the arena and gathers his energy into his hands before using them at a focus to look through
As a focus.
as a focus. He resolves himself to destroy the arena, imploring Goku to avoid the attack at all costs. Goku remains stubborn, proclaiming that he'd never run away. Tien then unleashes the attack, firing a beam downward from his hands and completely vaporizing the arena. Goku is nowhere to be seen. So the energy cannon we'll talk about here, I think is the last real point that we have.
Right. So, like we've talked about with many other things that Tien does, this is an attack from above again, right? Where he elevates himself and then there's the downward facing attack. It is a a spirit attack, right? It's called the spirit cannon, and Roshi calls out that it's many more times more destructive than the Kamehameha wave. Why do you think that is? That this instantiation would Roshi would want to point out multiple times that it's far more destructive technique than what the
Well,
Kamehameha
it's
is.
because the elevation of one's being over everyone else inherently is more destructive than using the truth to sort out chaos, things you don't know. And so what Tien is doing here, and the reason why it takes some of his life force, right, is because it's instantiating himself almost artificially above the things that he above the world, above the things that he considers beneath him. And it is obviously a technique of Shen. And that's kind of revealed here when Roshi says that Shen taught him things that he shouldn't know. And so using this and sacrificing one's own life force or own spirit for destruction itself is one of the most destructive things there is. And so that's why it's obviously much more destructive than the Kamehameha wave, because the Kamehameha wave is intended and designed to create order out of chaos, where the Kikoho is designed to destroy and let's say level everything but beneath you.
Right. And I kind of want to draw an analog here because this is like the difference between the truth and really good debate tactics. Right? There's a way of using your speech, way of using your breath where you attack something from above and deconstruct it. You destroy it, right? And this is sort of this
Right, it's the rationality. It's
yeah.
being Lucifer looking down upon the order that
But
exists.
specifically this takes apart the whole arena, right? It's a perfect whole that uh, obliterates the arena
And I
itself.
know what you're getting at with the debate tactics. You're saying debasing and poisoning the well of the entire idea of hierarchy.
Yes.
Right, and that is what it is,
And
and
but it also
that's
in
what Shin can do,
yeah.
right? Because Shen's instantiation is um utilizing the wisdom of the past to forward one's own gains in an unholy manner. And so when presented with an obstacle that is not able to be overcome, Shen's ultimate strategy, his ultimate technique, is to destroy and debase the entire grounds for the conflict itself.
Right. Well, and it also is a symbolic move here because when this tactic is used here uh to win the game of games, it invalidates the game. Like it is no longer a game anymore, right? Like playtime is over in the most literal sense in the story now
Yes,
because there
and
is no game of games. Like the game they've been playing is about to transcend into the actual reality. What if you actually needed to
the
have
reason
these techniques to
is
defend yourself from something?
this is the last limit that can be experienced without having true evil, not malice, but evil in the world. And so we've seen somewhat of evil with mercenary Tao. That's the closest we've gotten. But Tao himself was selfish, just wanting money, right? We haven't seen the actual true evil that can come out of the unholy trinity of being both, sorry, not both, but all of these arrogant, deceitful, and resentful. We haven't seen that quite yet.
Right.
And so we're about to, because the debasing of
Exactly.
the debasing of the hierarchy itself and the destruction of that can only lead to a conflict between those two ideas, what Goku represents, or let's say the redeeming factors of the world represent, versus the actual evil manifest in the world.
Right. The number one under the heavens tournament is a symbol of order, right? It grounds the morality of the world that they live in. It's this is like how do I want to put it? There's no knowledge of evil until the game is over, right? And then the stakes. It's almost like the pressure valve is let off now because this it's almost like a shrine, right? A shrine to movement, the best way to move in the world, and and it is a symbol to the whole world of like this is the way that things should be. This is how you should comport yourself. Like in all fights, you should be gracious.
And you should attempt to subordinate yourself only to heaven and be number one above everything else.
But
But
always subordinate
this,
yourself to heaven.
but this is saying heaven, the idea of even competing to be above heaven, that idea is destroyed.
Beneath heaven, you mean?
That's what I meant.
Yeah.
And now, and Tien kind of puts himself above that, right? By doing this action to begin with. And by doing that, he's kind of launched off this chain of events, which actually don't want to talk about that yet.
Yeah, because this has a lot to do with Roshi
Right.
and
We're
everything
gonna
else
address that
next.
next episode.
But yeah,
Or not even, maybe 2 episodes from now. But
over
we'll
the course
address
of the
that
next
very
two
soon.
episodes
Yeah,
for
yeah.
sure. But
We're
yeah,
not there yet.
but I do
I'm getting ahead
want
of
to point out though that it's like he looks through his hands, right? And he puts all of his spirit into his hands and he forms them into almost like an eye, right? It's like the shape of an eye and he looks through it and he declares that his enemy is the ring itself, right?
It's actually, well, he tries to focus. Yeah, he tries to focus on the ring, and he makes a triangle, right?
Yeah.
Which is the 2 eyes and the third eye, right? It's that
Yeah.
idea. The triangle here, and by doing that, right, he's basically symbolically saying that it is within my grasp and within my understanding this hierarchy before me, but I myself can rationalize it out of existence.
By symbolizing that cap at the top of the pyramid, right? Saying that I am the cap
By
at the top of the spirit
being,
of the
and he
pyramid, right?
has, and to be honest, it has by
Right.
him interacting with Roshi and Goku such that he's bettered himself in such a way over the course of a tiny amount of time that he can now place himself at the top of that and blast down onto the hierarchy, destroying the whole thing. But also, like I said, using an unholy attack from Shen, it's gonna take his spirit away, or diminish his spirit, I should say.
Right. It burns his ability to manifest his spirit whenever he does it. It's like a legacy attack.
Sure, yeah.
um but yeah, I think that really specifically acting out that he is that cap at the top of the pyramid, which is what everyone's supposed to ultimately be beneath, right? It's that logos at the top that you say like there's a divine pattern above whatever my pattern is, and I
Well, let's
still
say
need to strive
Father,
towards
Son,
it.
Holy
Yeah.
Spirit, right? Superordinate
You're
above
right.
that.
The superordinate triangle above
Yeah.
the hierarchy. And so he identifies with it and is able because he is able to identify with it, he focuses an attack that essentially says that how would I say
That there are no grounds by which anyone can stand under the scrutiny of Tien's spirit, let's say.
yeah, it's an interesting thing too because we think about the last time what defeated Goku was not cutting off his tail but destroying the moon. And so there's this anchor that's destroyed at the end of this whenever the hierarchy is reset, right? And the anchor this time is it destroys the arena. It's like Goku's tie to the game, right? It's Goku's
Mm-hmm.
ability to continue playing and not having to wield that malice and not feeling obligated to in that sense, right? He's been able to live in this.
And now he has to.
eh,
Now he's
I don't
almost
want to call it pre and post cosmogonic, but it is very similar to that, where it's that knowledge of evil gets integrated in, and now
right. We've
there's a
reached a
fall.
point where the integration of malice and evil that Goku is experiencing has expelled him from paradise, more or less.
Right.
And so, um, yeah, I think that's a good place. Unless you have anything else to add.
No.
Yeah, I think that's a good place to end off. We're going to continue talking about the spirit canon going forward because it is in the aftermath of the next episode. But I think that's a good place for us to kind of wrap up this episode, which was episode 100. If you liked what you heard, please give us a like. Subscribe to our channel. We upload new episodes Mondays and Thursdays to YouTube, Tuesdays and Fridays to Rumble. We should be getting some face cam very soon for the channel, and I hope that will bring in some more views because I think what we're saying is very pertinent to the discussion of the fandom. But other than that, I think we're in a good place to end. I'm your host on the left, Owl,
I'm your host on the right, Brock.
and we hope you guys have a good night.
In an enchanted land that seemed untouched by the steady march of time, there lived an old master named Gohan, who found a baby boy abandoned in the wilderness of the region. The old master raised the boy as his own child, and marveled as the youngster grew and became uncommonly strong. Now the boy, known as Goku, is on his own, and has become the sole guardian of his grandfather's most mystical possession, his Dragon Ball.